In this episode, Carl Nash talks about Curie and all the different aspects of being a top curator.
Right. So, you're a Curie curator and recently named Curie representative?
Yeah, so just in this past week, myself and another Curie curator, Geek Girl, were also both named Curie community representatives.
And here we are in the community.
Exactly. So I would certainly love to take a second to represent Curie. I think Curie is a great organization, and it took me a long time on platform before I understood what Curie was. I had a post curied, I guess you can use it like a verb, and so did my wife, who's on platform. At Dill Emma is my wife. But in both cases, a vote that came trailing in behind Curie was larger than the Curie vote when my post was Curie. So when I looked at the votes, I didn't realize that Curie was actually the driving force behind what had caused this post to explode. And I was on the front page trending art page for a week solid. Had a $200 payout post, but I didn't realize that it was because of this Curie organization. It wasn't until a long time later that I heard people talking about it, and so I went and checked out the steamit.chat Curie channel and read the pin notes and realized, I bet that's why my post took off, and I went and looked into it, and I'm like, sure enough, it did.
Yeah.
And it was actually a kind of a deciding moment that really, I probably would have stayed on platform, but it really lit the fuse under my butt and inspired me to keep posting really high quality posts. And the same thing with my wife, and I know that it's the same thing with many people. So I guess to back up slightly, Curie is a curation organization that has a group of curators that look for posts, and then a group of reviewers who review the posts that are submitted by the curators. Curie has a set of specific guidelines that they're looking for, posts from authors within a certain rep range, typically between rep 27 and 52. Looking for posts with less than $1 pending payout at the time that they're submitted. Looking for posts by an author who's persistent with little success, meaning somebody who, not necessarily somebody's first or second post, but somebody who's been posting, hasn't been discovered, hasn't been rewarded, but is making quality content. The kind of poster who may get discouraged and leave the platform, but who is adding value to the platform, and maybe if they were rewarded and they stayed on, they could go on to do great things. And there's a lot of people who got their start because they were curated by this organization, and they got big payouts, and that's what gave them, their Steam Power stake initially and got them engaged. So I'm proud to be a part of it. And the way Curie works is it's basically a pretty transparent and decentralized organization. There isn't really like a management team, and there's just basically a formula that determines who is a top curator or who's not based on the number of your submissions that are approved by the reviewers. And anybody can become a top curator. Top curators are the ones who recommend new curators. So I've been a top curator the last 5 weeks. Each week that you're a top curator, you can recommend a new curator. So I've recommended a few new curators into this process. And once you've attained the status of a top curator for at least 1 week, then you gain access to a private chat channel that's only for the top curators, and that is basically where the decisions for the organization are made, just by a kind of collective decision of everybody who's made it there.
Right.
So no real, there's not like a governance structure so much as it's a collection of people that are a part of it, and we're all kind of making this decision. And it's all the proceeds that Curie brings in all get distributed back either as finder's fees to the curators. You get a finder's fee every time you submit a post and it's accepted.
Okay.
There's also kind of an incentivized reward structure so that if you recommend a new curator and they do really well, the recommender gets a bonus, and which makes sense to me because it saves time for the reviewers.
Right.
If a new curation recommendation is only submitting quality posts, then it's great for the reviewers. They're not having to sift through all this crap to find something that they can approve.
Makes their job. Yeah. So that's the only way. If you're interested in becoming a Curie curator, you have to be recommended by another top curator.
Yes.
And yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, that's the basic process. Now, I should mention that there's a few other things that Curie supports too. So there's what Curie calls sub-communities, and these are communities on different areas of interest. Like there's a music sub-community. There are several sub-communities for different areas of the world. There's like a Nigerian sub-community.
I see.
And each of those communities have their own elected leaders and basically have their own system for what posts they're going to upvote. It's completely separate from the process I was describing, where there's curators who recommend posts for review. And so each community has a voting proxy that if they choose to upvote a post, they upvote it through this particular account that's a voting proxy for Curie, and Curie comes along and follows that vote. So, and those are typically smaller votes, smaller vote strength votes.
Right.
So
right.
Curie might be upvoting a post, at 20% or 30% vote strength if it goes through the submission process that I first described, whereas it might be like a 1 or 2% vote strength for these subcommunities. But the total number of posts that are upvoted through these subcommunities, they upvote a much larger number of posts than go through the recommendation process.
And in some of those sub-communities, even a small vote is a big vote.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm actually in the middle of doing some analysis on this, and Curie will be publishing kind of a white paper, basically. So I've been looking at this, and there's actually a pretty significant chunk of the rewards that are going out from Curie are going into these various subcommunities, and certainly they upvote a far greater number of posts than the standard process.
Yeah.
And I will also say that Curie will sometimes upvote a post even if it doesn't, if it doesn't meet the general guidelines. Maybe the author's a little too high rep for the guideline, or the post has already gone over $1 payout. If the post is really exceptional and it's just a great post, those rules can all be bent a little bit. So you might see Curie occasionally giving a big upvote to somebody who's a little higher rep. It means that the reviewer said, hey, I understand that this doesn't meet the exact guidelines, but it was still a post that wasn't valued properly. It's a great post. It was still, only had a $1 payout or whatever. It doesn't matter if this guy's rep 55. It's still an undervalued post, and we'll give it a big upvote. Which I do see confusing people sometimes when they've read the guidelines and they're like, Curie's only supposed to upvote, within this author rep range. Why did I see this guy getting an upvote? It's like, well, because it was an awesome post.
Right.
I can't, I personally don't think anybody should have a problem with that, but maybe there is somebody out there. But just keep in mind that it's basically a subjective decision on the part of the reviewers. And I should mention that the reviewers are all ex-top curators themselves, and in fact can continue to be curators. They can't review their own submissions. So a reviewer can definitely still submit things, and then a different reviewer would have to review their submission and decide whether it gets approved or not.
Well, bending the rules a little bit just goes to show that Curie is for the people, by the people. It's not set in stone, but as long as it's a exceptional post, there's a chance.
It's really, you could sort of think about it. I watched a great video from the first year of Steamfest, and it was Kevin Wong, who was one of the original founders of Curie, and he was introduced. He gave a speech at the first Steamfest, about Curie and what they'd done so far, and he was introduced by a guy named Anarcho Andre, I think is his name. He's now a Steam like a Steam at Inc. employee and a community representative. I might have got his name wrong, but at the time he was not a Steam at Inc. employee, and he introduced Steemit, and he likes to look at what the Steam economy is, and he views Steam as like a proto-economy because it has most of the things that you would see in a normal economy, but it doesn't have the institutions that you would see in an actual established real economy.
Right.
And so his point was really interesting, which is that Steemit was, or rather Curie was basically the first kind of proto-institution that arose. And what he thought was interesting is that he said that Curie is more or less like a welfare organization that is involved with helping to balance out wealth inequalities, and basically saying, here's a way to, you've got this poster here who's making great posts but isn't making any money, and you've got these other posters here who are making tons of money, and there's this huge inequality of wealth.
Right.
Curie is like an institution that helps address this wealth inequality and helps give these posters a boost up and kind of lifts them up out of that place.
Yeah,
so you can think of it as a welfare organization in a way.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it because, I mean, there is that gap there, you know. People, the people who came to Steemit early on got big a lot quicker than the people who are coming to Steemit right now.
I don't know if you've ever looked back at like the early post payouts and whatnot, but SQL Query lets you look back. Man, there were authors regularly making $1,000 plus per post, and individual comments were getting $10 upvotes just because of the reward pool was getting split out into such a smaller number of people, and plus Steam was worth $4, you know, per Steam there. So.
Yeah.
In episode 3, we're going to look at Carl Nash's personal projects, curation projects on Steemit.